Digital CxO podcast. I'm Amanda Rosani, and I'm here today with Mike Vizard. How are you doing today?
I'm well, guys. I'm just off a flight from Paris, so it's a little ragged, but other than that, I'm pretty good.
Yes, I applaud you being able to get up and do this right away. And I can't wait to hear all the news from KubeCon and all the information gathered over there. So, the first round of news that we're going to discuss today is a lack of tech skills and some shortages in that area across several business sectors. Starting with an Infosys survey, which surveyed 1,000 business executives. And it was very interesting because it found that 75% of business executives are concerned about the rapid technology change rate exceeding their capacity to implement these innovations. And part of the issues with that is a skills gap in being able to harness these new technologies, such as AI and various other ones. Big skills gaps were in statistical analysis, machine learning, and cloud computing. So, what are your thoughts, Mike?
I think the business leaders are finally waking up to the fact that how dependent they've become on IT and software specifically, because I can't think of a business today that doesn't, to one degree or another, wholly depend upon IT to deliver its services. And we see it all the time when IT suddenly is unavailable. It's not that the business is inconvenienced, it just shuts down for the period of time when IT is being quote unquote fixed. And it's a little bit disappointing, to be honest, because this issue's been floating around for a long time, and you would think that business execs would get savvy about this. And the IT skills shortage is a major problem. Now, I will tell you that there is some silver lining in all of this. The survey kind of looks at the willingness of the business leaders to invest in upskilling, and it's kind of basically comes up with some numbers that suggest that we're finally going to see some investments in training. And part of this is, I think the average business executive thinks that they're George Steinbrenner, and somehow or other they're going to find the person with the right skills magically and hire them for the right price like you would any other sports team. But the reality of the situation is everybody's out there looking for the same talent, the same players, and you can't find them. And they're not going to go get skills just because you want them. They're going to have to get some sort of training program, and somebody's going to have to pay them to get to the training. And I think business leaders are starting to figure that out because their investments in things, or especially around training, appear to be increasing from the survey results. That said, the survey also suggests that they want internal employees to be able to do multiple jobs. Now, last time I checked, when you wind up doing multiple jobs, you do some of them well and most of them poorly. So it's going to be an interesting set of times, because I think on the plus side, business leaders are starting to get it. On the negative side, they're still somewhat delusional.
Yes, it's a real issue, and I agree. And it actually brings us into a very similar survey. There are a lot of surveys around this topic and the lack of skills being a problem. So we're going to move on to a Broadridge Financial Solutions survey, which shows, and this was the 2024 Digital Transformation Report. And it shows a big gap with financial companies and companies that are big investors in transformation technology and have already adopted technologies such as AI and various other technologies early. They're pulling ahead of the other companies. So when they did a little bit more research, there was only 27% of financial businesses considered leaders in innovation and technology implementation. The rest are lagging behind for various reasons. A big one being a skill set again, and how to implement this technology effectively. So again, when I speak with leaders, it's what you said. They themselves, the companies, are going to have to offer these skill up opportunities and on-site available training, because that may be the only way they're going to find the talent that they need.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that leapt out at me about this survey was the leaders seem to have had more faith in their employees, right? That it seemed to be saying that they empowered those folks lower level to make decisions about technology and how to employ it. And I think part of the issue when we talk about anything related to digital transformation is, we convinced everybody that it had to be C-level led, right? And we had to have all these folks who were CEOs who were going to drive this thing because of the resistance to change factor. And I think maybe we've overestimated that. I think there's a lot of younger employees in these organizations that know exactly what needs to be done to kind of create a digital experience because they're digital natives. I think the C-level execs want that outcome. They just don't know exactly how to get there. The resistance is probably in the middle somewhere where you have folks that are not digital native and they are wedded to certain processes as they exist today. We have talked in the past how all too often, somebody digitizes something and it's basically the tablet version of an existing paper-based process and it doesn't really work. So I think part of what we got to get to now is just empowering folks at the lower levels who are tomorrow's middle managers and eventually the future CEOs to drive this. I mean, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, and this is all part of, the agile methodologies of, minimizing silos and giving more people responsibilities in different areas and everyone communicating in a good way and collaborating to get to the point they need to be.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's that I need to know DevOps or Agile or any of these methodologies. I think they're, a nice place to start because it just gives you a cultural frame of reference. But ultimately, I think it's just a matter of trust. It's not like anybody's going to go out and, deliberately do something malicious or stupid just because they can. It's important to have some guardrails around these things, but ultimately you got to let people experiment. And the only way to really experiment is to put something out there. You can do all the things you want in the world on a proof of concept, but until it meets the real world, you'll never know for sure what you're looking at or what the challenges are and what the issues are. You might want to recruit some customers who are more, shall we say, part of the coalition of the willing to be experimented on, but that's kind of where we are. And to me, it just seems like we're stuck. And whether it's even in financial services where you see fintech all the time, if you look at who's doing well with fintech, it's some small startup versus typically the larger bank. I mean, I won't name my bank, but my bank has a decent to mediocre digital experience, but it's hardly anything to write home about. And it's not anything that I go, woo, I can deposit a mobile check. Awesome.
Yep. That's about the level of my bank. All right. So moving on, we're going to completely change directions now, and we're going to talk about basketball. So when it comes to the NCAA bracket picks, we have some coaches that are very irritated with the current system in place. The their NCAA system is called NET, that does all their data analysis. And it left out some pretty important teams and their coaches. For example, St. John's University coach Rick Pitino was mystified when they were left out of the tournament. And that's just one coach. There were several. And basically went so far as to say NET is fraudulent and they need to drop it. So in come some bracketologists who really study this stuff, and they're turning to AI to help them scour through lots of data across the years and make better picks. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, where to start? First of all, Rick Pitino has been mystified about many things over the years. So he's somewhat infamous in college basketball circles, but he has a point in the sense that there's not enough transparency into the process. So no one knows exactly why the analytics thing recommended what it did. And but still, there's a selection committee, aka people who maybe relied too much on this system to make their decisions, but you don't know because you don't exactly understand why the NCAA picks certain teams to go with certain players. Now, in the first round, there were some significant upsets, right? And Kansas folks and all these other teams are kind of struggling. And I think it was Kentucky got bounced, and that kind of flipped everybody out because a 16th ranked Oakland team beat them. And that really wasn't reflected in the outcome of the data. But this is a human-based sport, right? It's called gambling for a reason. So if it was going to be like the brackets are going to be the number one seeds are always going to win, then we can just skip to the last 4 games and call it even. So I'm a little kind of like, sometimes I think we ask too much of the analytics. And I know analytics is all over sports today, but my beloved New York Yankees have more analytics than any other team, and that has not resulted in a World Series in the last decade. So I'm kind of like, at some point you got to play the game.
Exactly.
Now, this particular article, I also know the author. His name is Frank Vizard, aka the brother, and he's also a basketball fanatic. And he and a lot of folks like him don't necessarily always believe in the analytics either. And I bring this up because a lot of business executives don't believe in the analytics either. They basically know where the data came from and how it was crafted. Heck, they're the ones that created the data and entered it, so they know how shaky the data is. So when someone from IT comes along and says, I got this awesome analysis of what's going on with the business, in their guts, they're already suspicious because they're kind of like, yeah, the data is, shall we say, ranges from inconsistent to crap. So I don't really want to make a business decision based solely on your analytics. And people are trying to strike a balance between old-fashioned human intuition and what the data allegedly says. And these things are not always compatible with each other. And to be fair on to the machines, humans, a lot of times they'll sit there and say, I mean, how many times a day do you hear somebody say, my gut tells me X? Well, gut telling you X is kind of like, your experience kind of suggests something, but honestly, is it your gut telling you something profound, or is it, what you had for lunch in a case of indigestion and you're just not quite up to the task of making the right intuitive decision? So it's nice to have data to fall back on, but I swear, 99% of the business execs I know are shopping for data answers that support the conclusion that they already made. And this
Yep.
does not help matters. And I know it drives the analytics people crazy because they're like, but the data says X. And now we have AI. Well, AI is only as good as the data that went into it in the first place. So garbage in, garbage out. And so it's not clear to me that AI is going to necessarily help this matter. So I mean, I'm in IT now for near on 30 years, and I love this stuff, but I'm telling you, I don't think I make business decisions based on what the data tells me either, because, well, I know what went into it.
Yeah, and it's just like you said, they can sway the data to read however they want anyway, a lot of the time. So um but okay, so still in the data analysis world, we're going to move over to a different use case scenario, which is very interesting. This was an article most recently published on Digital CxO, and it's about video intelligence in cities, helping them to become a little bit more smart cities. And it's a little archaic. A lot of cities, they just have someone sitting there watching all the video footage when they need to, as they need to. And this is not the best way, according to this expert, which is that you can really harness video intelligence, put up video across the city, and have the data analytics automated so that it's always scraping through the video footage, and that this would help because cities have increasingly operated on a lesser and lesser budget. So as they're operating on a way smaller budget, if they utilize this smart video intelligence and automate the data analysis, they can make the city safer, find solutions more quickly. So what are your thoughts?
All right, well, there's two things about this that are just flat out crazy. So let's start with the first one. I think I remember chatting with somebody from the CIA about it 5 or 6 years ago, and they were saying that it would take the better part of a month for all the analysts at the CIA to watch 5 minutes of all the video that was created on the web. And so, mathematically, it doesn't make any sense to have people sitting there looking at a bunch of video, hoping to identify some trends and analysis, because the video keeps running and it keeps piling up and you'll never catch up. So it's kind of a silly endeavor in the first place. Um, Secondly, the person watching the video, well, okay, let's say I do see a crime in action. By the time I react to the crime in action and call somebody and get somebody over there, the crime is quote unquote over. So it's not like I'm really going to be able to uh, prevent a whole lot of activity. And then thirdly, I grew up in the Bronx in the 70s and 80s, tough place. If there's a video camera around, the first thing that anybody who's committing a crime is going to do is what? They're going to knock off the video camera. So there's going to be like, they're not that stupid where they're just going to wave at it and go, hi, look at me. I'm about to commit a crime so that you can come arrest me later. I mean, I grant you, there are plenty of criminals who are stupid and will probably do something like that. But ultimately, I think we need to find some analytics so that we're identifying the problem areas most. Right, what we really want to get to is to say, hey, is this section of town experiencing more crime and of what kind? And if we have more officers on patrol here, then maybe we can prevent that. So it's got to be more about prevention of the behavior that leads to crime. I mean, back in the 80s, we had this whole anti-squeegee campaign in New York, and it was, probably had some civil liberty issues attached to it. But at the end of it, it was pretty clear that, if you chase down all the broken windows and small crime, that, there's less of the larger crime because it escalates. And that's just part of what happens. And if there's no police officers around, the criminal element will do what it wants to do. So I feel like this is yet another example of maybe we're asking too much of the technology, but we need it. It's just we got to get smart about how we use it.
Absolutely. And I think there's ways to disguise the cameras. I know there's more and more ways to disguise them and, place them in higher places where they can't be reached. And then, using technology to automate, like you said, figure out how to stop it before it happens and, populate those areas with more police officers and such. So, yeah, it's a ways to go, but I think everybody's just envisioning, we're all visionaries, envisioning how we can use this technology in the future, which will be great once it's a little bit better.
Even now, though, they're selling masks that you can wear that will defeat the video recognition technology. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you checked out the last time the arc of a spray can paint, but pretty much you
Yeah,
can shoot that thing for a good dozen feet or so, and pretty much take out a camera no matter how high up it is.
very true. Very true. Well, that brings us to the end of all of our digital transformation discussions for today. Do you have any last thoughts, Mike?
No, I will just, kind of finish up a little bit with what we were doing in Paris last week at the KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con conference. It was, heavily geek technology and mostly about, think cloud native technologies from um, Kubernetes to WASM and all kinds of buzzwords that probably a lot of folks in the digital CxO space don't fully know or appreciate. But the big takeaway of it all is, technology is marching on. We got AI, we got all kinds of new stuff coming down the pike. So if you don't have the skills to take advantage of it, I guarantee you one thing, you will be left behind.
That's for sure. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to our Digital CXO podcast and have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.